Laughter rang out before anyone even understood what had happened. God, you wore that to a gala? Celeste C. Vaughan, 29, lifted her wine glass as if raising a blade, slicing straight through the glittering air beneath the crystal ceiling of Zenith Tower. The words, sharp and cold, fired like bullets. Champagne flutes froze mid-air. Diamond-clad wrists stiffened into glassy petals. A moment collapsed into emptiness. Beneath the chandeliers, Aurora Blackwell sat alone by the obsidian glass wall, her indigo silk gown wrapping her slender frame like the night embracing the horizon. She wore no jewels except for a pair of small pearls, her silver-grey hair swept into a neat bun, the nape of her neck a proud, bare line. Before her was a glass of water so cold the condensation clung like breath to its surface. Aurora lowered her gaze to the curve of the table, as calm as if she were observing a private galaxy only she could see. Celeste leaned away from her own table, a table of young, polished investors, surgically refined muses with swollen lips, a silver-bearded hedge fund manager who had once shorted an entire economy and let out a laugh bright and brittle like a crystal flute struck with a spoon. Honey, next time Google Gala Couture before you show up. Oh, right, forgot. Maybe where you're from. Wi-Fi isn't even free. The sharp ooh hit the marble floor like glass shattering. Some covered their mouths, not out of shame, but to hide their delight. A fashion blogger whispered to a friend, sprinkling salt on the wound. That dress is an apology to the gods of boredom. At a corner table, a hedge fund manager muttered into his scotch. Looks like the charity committee sent invitations to the wrong people this year. Aurora blinked once, slowly, deliberately. Not to swallow humiliation, but to store it, as if pulling a new file, labeling it, and placing it deep inside a mental cabinet. She had heard this tone before, at 22 when an investor called her software pitch cute, at 35 when a board dismissed her billion-dollar acquisition plan only to cheer 6 months later when a man repeated the exact same proposal. Tonight it was still the same French perfume, masking desperation, still the same cheap smile of power, mistaking louder laughter for higher status. Across the room, Mina Park, 25, a freelance journalist who had snuck in with a borrowed catering badge, felt her heartbeat slam against her ribs. She tilted her clutch slightly, her phone's lens poking discreetly through a seam. The red light blinked. Orek. This wasn't small talk at a ballroom. This was a cultural line being drawn, and she was capturing it. On the far side, Victor Zhang, 60, a private equity titan from Shanghai, whispered to his wife in Mandarin, his voice smooth as silk. They are poking a sleeping dragon. They mistake silence for weakness. He did not know Aurora personally, but he knew her name where it mattered, in clauses, in signatures at the bottom of contracts, in the unseen hand that shifted economies before tabloids could catch up. Celeste slid platinum hair over her shoulder, her molten gold dress clinging to her hips like sunlight poured into shape. Her smile widened, but her eyes betrayed the impatience of an attention addict. Sweetheart, if you're looking for a rich husband, remember to use the back entrance. This one is for guests. She spat the word guests like flicking grit from her tongue. A few heads nodded. Phones that had been discreet were now raised openly. People rose from their seats, nerves taut, waiting for the next crack. But no crack came. Only the steady breath of Aurora. She ran a finger down the condensation on her glass, drawing a line, straight, thin, perfect. It was not a nervous gesture. It was a boundary. The rhythm shifted, slow in her glances, fast in the shivers rippling through the crowd like electricity. Aurora's silence was not emptiness, it was compression. Every insult hurled into it only raised the pressure. A saxophonist on stage faltered half a beat, an artist's instinct catching the storm. At Celeste's table, a young investor laughed sharply, but his laughter broke off when his eyes met Aurora's by accident. The darkness in her gaze was not sorrow, but something cold and ancient, like the ocean's floor where light cannot reach. His neck prickled before he looked away, as if dodging a laser. Mina typed quickly. Her silence is not retreat. It is a mirror. She panned to Celeste, still laughing, still pouring, still dancing on marble in stiletto heels like she had already won. But the room was shifting, not loudly, but beneath the surface, like a massive iceberg pulling the current along with it. Aurora, the woman deemed underdressed, lowered her head slightly. Mina zoomed in. What was she looking at? She caught the candle flame in the center of the table, flickering within its glass shield, splitting into two, then merging again. That image, a wordless signal, sent a chill through Mina. Someone was counting beats. Celeste pressed on, blind to the silence. Security? Is this guest even on the list? Looks like the net slipped tonight. The room stirred. The phrase not on the list cut sharp and clean, planting instant stories in the crowd. Sneaking in, clinging, hunting for sponsors. Easier to believe than to look in the mirror at their own unconscious prejudice. Aurora still said nothing. No defense. No excuse. She lifted her glass, sipped, and set it down. The base touched the cloth without a sound. That was control learned only after 1,000 hostile meetings. The control of someone once asked to leave a shareholder meeting because she didn't look like the majority stockholders, who returned the next day with lawyers and papers dismissing the entire board. Victor lowered his glass, his gaze as thin as a blade. The Golden Girl is building a tower out of mockery, and she doesn't realize each brick is heavier than her smile. His wife tugged his sleeve. Are you sure? Victor nodded. I'm not sure about many things, but I'm sure about Aurora. The cameraman instinct awoke in everyone. Lenses swung from the target to the aggressor. Celeste saw the glances, uneasy and sidelong. She frowned briefly, then drowned it with louder laughter and more wine, a hit of adrenaline for her addiction to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, she raised her glass, her voice brassy. If someone doesn't know their place, shouldn't we help them? The MC flinched, glancing down at the schedule in confusion at this unscripted act. The band gritted their teeth and replayed a cheery refrain, like plaster over a deep cut. Aurora placed her napkin across her palm, tracing its hem as precisely as a surgeon preparing the first incision. Mina swallowed hard, typing sharper words. She's not waiting. She's measuring. A young waiter with curly hair passed by, pausing mid-step as he noticed the perfect condensation line Aurora had drawn. He didn't understand why, but he felt respect for that small gesture. Then he moved on, his tray trembling like a frightened bird. Come now, security. Celeste cast her glance toward the doors like tossing a necklace. The guards looked at each other instinctively. They saw an older woman, poised and still, and a young CEO demanding urgency. They hesitated. Something didn't align. Amid the clash of horns, clinking silver, stiletto taps, a pocket of silence opened around Aurora. She exhaled softly. Memories did not crash like waves, but lined up like soldiers. The rainy night at the conference hall gate, when a guard said, "This is a private event. Not for people like you." The long road she had walked to make such rooms irrelevant. At the host's table, Gregory Hale, 63, frowned. He didn't recognize the woman in indigo silk, but the surname Blackwell brushed past his memory like a draft. Who signed what, when, and how the profits rolled in. He looked at Celeste, the face of media hype, then at Aurora, the shape of classic gravity. He almost stood, then sat back down. Social cowardice, mixed with a dash of cruel curiosity, kept him in his chair. Mina lifted her phone higher. The frame caught the molten gold dress and the deep indigo gown, two poles in one room. She typed another line, short and clear. Power doesn't shout. It shifts the air pressure of the entire room with one breath. Celeste tilted her red wine glass, her painted smile curving wider. At its edge, Mina caught a crack, hairline thin but real. The crack of someone who cannot understand the language of silence. The crack of someone who had pushed too far and could not pull back. Aurora looked again at the candle, the flame now steady like a sleeping heartbeat. She raised her glass of water, touched it to her lips, and set it down. No sound. The chamber tightened another notch. Those who knew how to listen heard the click of a safety catch somewhere in the air. The jazz stumbled, then forced itself back in rhythm. Celeste's table roared louder, but winded quickly. The loudest laughers began glancing at each other. One muse pulled a shawl over her shoulders. The silver-bearded investor found his scotch suddenly bitter. And at the eye of the storm, where no wind blew, Aurora placed her hand on an ivory clutch. She didn't open it, just rested her palm as if marking an appointment to be kept precisely on time. She didn't lift her gaze, but the entire room felt weighed and measured by that touch. The quick rhythm sliced through like a cut, a curtain tugged, light swaying, a waiter dropping a fork that clattered louder than it should, a phone lighting up with a caller ID flashing across as a signal. Mina tightened her grip on her phone, whispering into her notes. If this were a hearing, the evidence would already be enough. Her heart beat fast, her hands steady. From her angle, gold shimmered like a false sun. Indigo pulled like a true knight. The stage was set without props, and when the minute hand crept past an invisible mark, the room, like a beast taught to perform, suddenly realized it was biting its own tail. The cheap thrill left a metallic taste. Aurora raised her head for the first time that night. Not at Celeste, at everyone. Her eyes swept over necks chained in diamonds, stopping at pupils shifting from smug to uneasy. No words, just one long look, enough for the clever to understand the real game hadn't begun. Sweetheart, Celeste's voice slithered across marble. Is silence your only defense? She smirked. Then let's upgrade. The wine tilted. The room held its breath. And at the edge between laughter gone and breath not yet released, another story was approaching. Slow, steady, like a train that cannot brake, rolling into the station right on time. Aurora pressed her palm over the ivory clutch, her thumb arched slightly like a finger on a lock. Her shadow stretched long and straight across the marble floor, cutting the room into two halves, one noisy, one powerful. The sound of the wine glass had not yet rung out when the MC's microphone hissed softly, like a cold chalk line dragged across a blackboard. Ladies and gentlemen, he forced a smile, his eyes skimming past the organizers, past the host's table, then snagging on Gregory Hale, the man with the oversized gold bow tie and a sudden stab of memory about a signature that had made him hundreds of millions. Gregory merely blinked, no nod, no shake, and the MC swallowed his next line, leaving the room to drift forward on its own cruel inertia. The wine glass in Celeste's hand stopped at a safe angle, as if an invisible hand had pressed on her wrist, not conscience, but a predator's instinct to delay the bite and prolong the sport. Celeste set the glass down, leaned to the table's edge, her voice velvet soft and needle sharp. The list. I want to see the list. Who let this lovely guest slip in tonight? A ripple rolled across the room. The words not on the list hit the marble, bounced back, and shattered into little giggles. In the corner, a blogger whispered behind a diamond-drenched hand, "She definitely snuck in." A muse mouthed, "Looks like the type who hunts for invites." Gazes knit themselves into a net and cast it over Aurora. Beautiful, meticulous, unfeeling, the kind of net rooms like this had woven for decades. Aurora Blackwell tilted her head as if hearing a familiar tune. She had stood at the threshold of more rooms like this than anyone could count. She knew the scent of power laced with fear of losing ground, the footfall of contempt in metal-heeled shoes, the "I am right, because I am bigger" laugh, drawn in highlighter. Those were ashes from an old battlefield. She did not need to look back. At the end of the tables, the jazz band tried to brighten the harmony, but the saxophone's tone thinned to a thread, followed by a breathless lull. Mina Park caught the moment. She pressed and held the frame, lowered the ISO, exhaled slowly. In her lens, she set the portrait side by side, molten gold and deep indigo, noisy and serene, counterfeit glow and true gravity. She typed quickly. The crowd is changing pressure. No one wants to admit it, but everyone feels it. Security. Celeste snapped her fingers. Two large men at the exit, Ramirez, 38, broad-shouldered, and O'Connor, 41, a faint wrist tattoo, switched positions and moved like a programmed orbit. The crowd parted, phones lifted, satisfied, excited. A few, the ones who knew the business, sagged at the shoulders, not from pity, from a premonition of risk. Aurora turned her glass slightly. The condensation on the crystal thinned slowly, leaving a faint border like a pencil line on a technical drawing. She did not look at the guards. She looked at the candle. The flame was steadier than before, as if the whole room were holding its breath to its rhythm. Victor Zhang leaned in, his voice so light only his wife could hear. They think they are staging a social play. They are walking into a shareholders' meeting without knowing it. She smiled tensely. You always speak in metaphors. Victor gave the faintest laugh. Because the plainest truths are the ones they refuse to see. Ramirez brushed O'Connor's arm as if asking, "Now." O'Connor gave the slightest shake of his head, his eyes pausing on Aurora, where he read a kind of invisible authority no uniform teaches, the calm that makes other shoulders drop. They advanced, but with more caution. "Sweetheart," Celeste laughed again, pouring herself more wine, an automatic ritual to shore up dominance. "You came through the wrong door. The back door is for the service staff over there." She extended a dark, red lacquered index finger in a straight line through the air, a conductor's baton wielded by someone who believes herself the maestro. A man in tennis athleisure clapped. Pop, pop, the clap of someone always served first. A patrician woman curled her lip and adjusted her necklace like tuning an instrument. A young server, the curly-haired one from before, stood still for 2 seconds, his face burning with second-hand shame. He thought of his mother who mopped floors on the night shift, and suddenly the room felt colder. Aurora's eyes finally left the candle. She lifted her gaze straight past Celeste, past the investor table, past the stalks of phones like reeds. She did not ask why. She did not say, "Enough." She did not explain. She simply breathed. "You asked if I am here to find a rich husband." Her voice was low, clean, stripped of every extraneous noise. I already met him. The room jolted as if its plug had been pulled. An ambiguous statement, and not ambiguous at all. I already met him, not a man, but power, but the system, but the money machine that signs papers on the backs of people like her. Mina looked up from her notes, eyes bright. She understood the use of misdirection to plant a stake in collective memory. Celeste's brow pinched for a beat. Then she laughed louder to shove the unease onto someone else. Listen. She flicked her hand, the red nail flashing under the chandelier. I love philanthropy, but tonight is not a soup kitchen. Someone check her cred. She hunted for allies with her eyes. Nods came slower. Smiles got thinner. A nameless dip passed over a few faces. Gregory Hale wiped sweat from his temple. The name Blackwell was no longer a draft. It was lightning behind clouds. He remembered a bridge financing, remembered a lifeline recap for the very tower they were standing in, remembered a chain of shell companies his lawyer had called exquisitely elegant. He leaned toward the MC. This time he meant to speak. But Celeste had already seized the room's microphone the way she knew best, by being louder. Security, she almost sang. The list. Ramirez pulled out his device. O'Connor opened his earpiece. A guest control attendant jogged over, hugging a clipboard like a shield. Aurora, he glanced up, froze, then ducked to the pages. Her name was not on his list. Of course not. Some names never appear on the sheet at the door. They print only in the banknotes. Mina swung her camera to Victor and caught the corner of his mouth lift. Not a smile, a recognition. He raised his glass, as if to clink with someone across the room. That invisible toast laid a bridge only those fluent in cash flow could see. Ramirez took another step. So did O'Connor. They were not rough. They were politely templated, the kind of politeness used to remove a person from the frame. Aurora laid her napkin over the fading condensation on the glass. The white edge curved around the crystal, like marking a coordinate at a scene. Her back was smooth and straight, shoulders loose, hands steady. She caught the faint vanilla in Celeste's perfume, the clean antiseptic in the table linen, the very light metallic note of old crystal fixtures. She heard her own heartbeat slow, then slower. The pressure chamber clicked one notch tighter. "Ma'am." Ramirez lowered his voice, as courteous as possible. "We need to verify your guest status." The word verify rolled across the stone like a marble. A woman in pearls pinched her husband's arm, pretending nonchalance. A young investor bit his lip. A dim red bead appeared and searched for someone else to carry the responsibility. Celeste felt control slipping like a silk sash off a shoulder. She gripped her glass harder. "Please escort her out," she said through tight teeth, the smile still bright. "We have standards." Mina noted. Standards. The velvet curtain of legitimacy. She felt the cool draft from the vents stroke her nape. For the first time all night, she shivered from excitement, not anger. At the host's table, Gregory clutched the edge. The image of an email outlining emergency withdrawal terms flashed in his mind. He parted his lips, enough to relieve a fraction of guilt, but his throat was dry. He took a sip of water. It tasted salty, like a late excuse. Ramirez reached toward the back of Aurora's chair, a professional gesture, non-invasive, an invitation, not a pull. Aurora tilted her head and looked at him, not at the man, at the role. And then, for the first time that evening, she spoke a full sentence, not to Celeste, not to the crowd, but to the system standing behind them. Do not force yourselves to do something irreversible. The words "something irreversible" struck an old bell in the minds of seasoned people. Lawyers blinked. A CFO at the back reached into his pocket for his phone without thinking. Victor leaned back and exhaled, not in relief, in confirmation. The piece had clicked. Irreversible, really? Celeste laughed, lifting her glass as if bestowing grace. "Sweetheart, you think this is a court?" She raised her chin and the light carved her cheekbone into a blade. "This is a party." Aurora nodded slightly as if agreeing. "Yes, a party." She placed her palm on the ivory clutch. She did not open it. She simply rested it there. But the bill arrives on time. A hair-thin chill passed through the room. No one saw it, but everyone felt it. The band stopped faking cheer. The saxophonist set his tongue to a blue note, a half-step that punished the air. Mina lowered her phone for a single breath, then lifted it again. She wrote, "She just changed instruments, from dance to accounting." Celeste laughed louder, like cranking the music to drown out rain on a tin roof. "Come on, everyone, let's not overreact to a guest without a name." "Ramirez." She no longer looked at Aurora. "Please." Ramirez swallowed, his fingertip touching the chair's edge. O'Connor glanced toward the soundboard where a technician was recording the microphone and ambient feed for event archives. The tech looked up, met O'Connor's eyes, then dropped his gaze to the panel. The red light was on. Aurora lifted her glass and took a small sip, as if lubricating the mechanism about to turn. She set it down without a sound. Her fingertips left the napkin's edge. She lowered her eyes for a beat, as if listening to the heartbeat of the room. And when she raised them, her line of sight passed clean through Celeste and did not snag. It reached farther, to where the lights could not reach, to the tower's mechanical room, to the bank's switching station, to a row of clauses sleeping inside someone's email. "Go on," Aurora said, her voice even, almost gentle. "I'm collecting data." Mina's mouth fell open. Collecting data. Not a victim, not a resistor. An auditor. The entire room shrank into a spreadsheet. Every laugh, every snap of fingers, every standard, a row to reconcile, a column to deduct. Somewhere high above, in a locked technical room, the HVAC shifted one notch. Colder, drier. Ramirez shivered. O'Connor swallowed hard. Celeste did not feel it. She was drunk on her own voice and deaf. "Fine." Celeste set down her glass. Her nail tapped 3 beats on the stem, the rhythm of someone giving orders. "We end this bit here." Aurora lifted the clutch. Light skated across the ivory leather, a brief glint like a scalpel before the first cut. No one noticed she was no longer looking at the candle. She was looking at time. The minute hand touched. The chamber was full. A piercing, silent beat fell into the room's center. And before the red wine could tilt another degree, before violence by wine could be staged as an accident, before any camera managed to zoom, another trajectory, deep, heavy, lawful, had already begun to move. The jazz fractured under an unexpected violin scratch, and in that instant, Celeste Vaughan tipped her glass, a dark red ribbon spilling like a fresh cut across the deep blue night. The wine was no accident. It was a power statement, brutal and deliberate. The crystal stayed snug in Celeste's hand, while the red stain spread fast across Aurora Blackwell's indigo silk, a wound blooming wider. The whole room inhaled as if they themselves had been stabbed. A woman covered her mouth. A man blurted, "My God!" She actually did it. A weak laugh broke and died at once, like a candle blown by a cold draught. Aurora lowered her eyes, not startled, not springing up, not angry, She simply watched the stain travel through the fabric, then calmly lifted a white table napkin and set it lightly on top, not to hide it, but to mark it, like signing a report exactly where it belongs. "Oh dear," Celeste cried, a hand theatrically to her chest, her voice bright and sweet like honey laced with poison. "So clumsy. I hope dry cleaning is not too expensive for your salary." Her smile widened, but this time it did not pull the crowd along. The atmosphere shifted color, entertainment became evidence. Phones that had first framed Celeste with relish now swung as one toward Aurora. Everyone suddenly understood they were recording a social crime, not a joke. Mina Park clenched the phone in her bag, fingers trembling yet firm as she hit re-see. In her view, the image sharpened. A peacock of cheap power painting herself, and a silent woman building a storm with composure. At the host's table, Gregory Hale wiped sweat as his heart sped up. The name Blackwell beat louder in his head, like a war drum. He half sensed it now. The game had moved to a different field. Celeste did not stop. She raised her empty glass and pitched her voice high. "Security. This person clearly does not belong here. Remove her. We cannot let a stranger contaminate the air of the gala." The room rustled, this time without one voice. Many people edged away from Celeste, as if avoiding sparks from an imminent blast. The two guards, Ramirez and O'Connor, stepped forward with a flicker of hesitation. They felt something off. The woman being shamed, sitting straight with relaxed hands, radiated an authority they could not classify as an outsider. Aurora looked up, her eyes, deep and dark as an abyss, fixed on Celeste, a look that did not need to shout, yet made the hall shiver, not rage, not spite, a silent warning. Then she set her ivory clutch on the table and clicked the clasp open with a soft press. In the noise, the tiny tick landed like a gavel. She drew out her phone and swept her thumb across the screen, a small motion that carried the weight of a verdict. "Helena," she said, even and clear, every syllable carrying across the hall without a microphone. "Activate Protocol 7. The guards halted. The room froze. Celeste let out a brittle laugh, but it rang shrill and solitary without chorus. Hilarious, calling an Uber or booking a street food table. Aurora didn't answer. On the line, her assistant's voice sounded crisp, just loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Madam Blackwell, the bridge contract with Vaughan Innovations has appeared, proceeding now to freeze all capital flows, cancel negotiations, and block transfer orders." A surge of whispers rolled the room. Vaughan Innovations, Celeste's company. Investors jolted, lips moving like they were reciting a spell. A few went pale and fished for their phones. Victor Zhang sat with arms folded, eyes flashing as he murmured to his wife, "I told you, they woke the dragon, and the dragon never roars. It only issues orders." Mina Park screamed inwardly. She knew she was filming a historic hinge, a shift not only for a gala, but for an empire. Aurora closed the clutch. The latch thumped like a bolt. She lifted her head and spoke evenly, loud enough for all to hear. "Ms. Astohum." "Vaughan, you did not just pour wine on my dress. You just signed the end of your $4.9 billion. And in that second, the entire Zenith Tower fell silent. The 100th floor ballroom now lay silent as the ocean floor. The clinking of glasses and false laughter had vanished, replaced by hurried whispers, like wind whistling through a crack before a storm. Aurora Blackwell sat still, her hand resting lightly on the ivory clutch. No shouting, no raised hand. Only a single command had shifted the very air in the room. Faces that once smirked with mockery were suddenly taut, as if they had just glimpsed a beast they thought tamed, suddenly showing its claws. At the investors' table, a man whispered, voice trembling, "Blackwell Ethel. Red Holdings, my God. She's the one holding the bridge capital for Vaughan Innovations." The person beside him shuddered and instantly pulled out his phone, opening his inbox. A string of alerts appeared, funding suspended, transfers frozen. Celeste Vaughan kept smiling, though the corner of her mouth trembled. She tried to cling to dominance, raising her empty glass, her voice booming. "This is just a farce. Do you think a phone call can change anything? How ridiculous." No one answered. This time the silence of the crowd was no longer complicit. It was doubt, coiling around Celeste like barbed wire. Victor Zhang leaned back, a cold glint of delight in his eyes. He murmured, "They still don't understand. Her stillness is the indictment." Mina Park swung her camera. The lens captured everything in sharp detail. Celeste's crooked smile, Aurora's eyes dark and still as a deep lake, the financiers' phones buzzing non-stop on their tables. Together they formed a strange symphony, one where true power made no sound, yet everyone heard it. Aurora slowly rose. Her chair slid back without a sound, as though even the marble floor held its breath. Golden chandelier light fell across the spreading stain on her gown, turning it into a luminous wound, not humiliation, but a badge of triumph. She spoke, not loud, not rushed, but enough to silence every whisper. "Mrs. Vaughan, I don't need a microphone. I don't need a nameplate. I only need one decision, and that decision has just erased your company's future." Celeste stepped back, her heel knocking into the chair leg with a sharp clack. The small sound made the entire room flinch. For the first time since entering the gala, the golden CEO looked smaller than the dress she wore. Gregory Hale, the host, was drenched in sweat. He knew Ethel Red Holdings held not only capital, but a web of cross-ownership stretching from this hotel to vast real estate projects. The realization struck him. I've let this ballroom become the stage for a public financial execution. But he stayed silent, as did almost everyone else. Mina Park gripped her phone, adding another line to her notes. Power is not being the loudest voice. Power is when the entire room shifts its axis, because one person stands. Aurora kept her hand resting on the table, her eyes fixed on Celeste. You thought I was invisible, but this silence is the measure. Every laugh of yours, I logged it. Every mockery, I recorded it. And now, I am simply closing the ledger. Tonight, you entered the final number yourself. The room shuddered as one. Celeste pressed her lips together, her voice cracking. No, this can't be. You're bluffing. I'll call my board. Aurora cut her off with a single glance. That was all. And in that moment, Celeste's phone vibrated. She snatched it open. Messages poured in. CFO. The deal is cancelled. Lawyer. Capital withdrawn. Board. We're finished. The glass in Celeste's hand slipped and shattered, the crystal's ring echoing like a gavel's final judgment. The sound of shattering crystal stretched out like a blade, slicing through the symphony of the gala night. Fragments scattered across the marble floor, glittering like broken stars, reflecting Celeste Vaughan's face, pale, shaken, and cracked beyond repair. The room held its breath. The cheap laughter from earlier was gone, replaced by the relentless vibration of phones, quickened breaths, and hurried whispers. Did she just say the deal was cancelled? 4.9 billion? God, Ethel Red controls all the bridge capital. Vaughan Innovations will collapse tonight. Aurora Blackwell stood tall, the chandelier's golden light falling across her silver hair like a cold halo. The red wine stain on her gown was no longer a mark of humiliation. It gleamed like the insignia of a battle already won. She took one step forward, only one, yet the crowd parted as though pulled back by gravity itself. No one told them to move, but Aurora's presence forced them aside. "Mrs. Vaughan," her voice rang out, not loud, not heavy, but so precise that each word felt carved into stone. "You mocked me because you thought I was worthless. You called security because you assumed I was an outsider. You poured wine on me, believing silence meant weakness. But the truth..." She paused, sweeping her gaze slowly across the room. Heads bowed. Some pretended to busy themselves with phones, others simply looked away. Mina Park lifted her camera higher, her heartbeat racing, knowing she was capturing a historic judgment. "The truth is, without Ethel Red Holdings, your company will not survive until morning." The words detonated. The room shook. Those who had laughed with Celeste moments ago now turned away in shame. A few quietly raised their glasses of water toward Aurora in a silent gesture of respect. Victor Zhang tilted his chin and whispered to his wife, with a thin smile, "See, they thought they were laughing at a shadow. But that shadow is the one with her hand on the valve." Celeste staggered, her towering heels suddenly a burden. She fumbled with her phone. The screen lit up with alerts. Loans cancelled. Funding terminated. Negotiations halted. Agreements collapsed. Her lips trembled as she tried to force a crooked smile. "No, this can't be. This is just a misunderstanding." A joke gone too far, Aurora tilted her head, as if listening to an instrument out of tune in an orchestra. Her reply was calm, with no smile, no emphasis, just naked truth. "You are mistaken. This is not a joke. This is the ledger. And I have just struck your name from it." The hall convulsed. The MC, who had been cowering in a corner, lowered his microphone without thinking, acknowledging that the stage no longer belonged to him. Mina added another trembling line to her notes. "An empire fell with a whisper. Real power never needs to shout." Celeste could not force another smile. She flung her phone onto the table, her voice breaking. "You'll regret this. You have no idea what you've done. You'll ruin everything. Me and yourself." Aurora stepped forward again. Her shadow stretched long across the floor, slicing through Celeste's golden light like a blade. She stopped, her gaze steady, her eyes as still as a winter lake. "I know exactly what I am doing," she said, "and I alone decide when it all comes crashing down." The declaration tilted Zenith Tower itself for a moment. Every gaze locked in one direction. No longer the eyes of spectators looking for amusement, but of witnesses staring at a financial and social earthquake unfolding before them. The air vents whispered softly. Yet inside the hall, everyone felt as if they were standing in a vacuum. Every breath was drawn toward Aurora Blackwell, the woman who had just turned a glittering party into a public tribunal. Celeste Vaughan stood frozen under the harsh glare of the chandelier, her golden dress now resembling rusted armor, its brilliance gone. Her hands trembled, her voice hoarse as she struggled to salvage a shred of dignity. "No, this is impossible. This is just a threat. You cannot cancel a $4.9 billion deal with a single phone call." Aurora did not answer immediately. She turned slightly, letting the light fall across her silver hair like a blade, then lifted her chin high. Her eyes swept across the room, passing over every face, those who had mocked her now bowing their heads in shame. Those who had cheered Celeste now frantically tapping their phones to alert their officers. All of them looked like students waiting for the teacher to call their name. Then Aurora spoke, not loud, not hurried, but every word struck like a hammer. That deal no longer exists. Ethelred Holdings has withdrawn. Vaughan Innovations will not draw breath past dawn. A glass clattered to the floor in the corner. A woman in diamonds clutched her mouth, eyes wide. A young businessman whispered, "God, the company just lost all of its working capital." Victor Zhang folded his arms, the edge of a smile tugging at his lips as he murmured to his wife, "This is the art of strategy. No need to strike. The opponent collapses on their own." Mina Park held her breath, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her lens followed Aurora, standing tall, silent, yet more devastating than any scream. She typed quickly into her phone, "An empire falls in silence." This is not breaking news. This is a historical verdict. Celeste let out a bitter laugh, but her voice cracked. "Who do you think you are? Some old woman in a worn dress daring to look down on me? The press, the media, all of Silicon Valley is on my side. You are nothing but a shadow." Aurora tilted her head, her eyes dark as an abyss. She took a single step forward. The crowd shifted aside, forming an invisible circle around her. And then she introduced herself, each word sharp and deliberate. "I am Aurora Blackwell, CEO of Ethelred Holdings. I do not need the press. I do not need the stage. I need only the pen in my hand. And with it, I have just erased your future." A tremor swept through the room, as if the crystal walls of Zenith Tower had just cracked. The crowd reeled, many gaping in shock, others blurting into their phones to call their lawyers. Celeste staggered back, her eyes wild, her lips trembling. "No, impossible, you are burying yourself. You will regret this." Aurora smiled, not the smile of triumph, but the sorrowful smile of one who has already seen every ending. She spoke softly, but loud enough for every camera to capture. "No, Celeste, the one who will regret this is you." The chandelier light fractured into cold golden shards. The ballroom, once a stage for arrogance, was now a court of power, where judgment had just been delivered and not a soul dared object. No one moved. The city's most luxurious ballroom had turned into a silent theatre, every gaze locked on two women at the center, one dazzling in gold, but trembling, the other grounded in indigo, proud and unyielding. Celeste Vaughan tried to lift her chin, her voice rasping like a frayed string about to snap. "You are destroying yourself. You'll lose every partner if you continue like this. Who will want to do business with someone who uses capital for personal revenge?" Her words fell flat, sinking into the cold marble without echo. The crowd did not support her. Instead, faces paled, not from pity, but from realization. If Ethelred Holdings truly pulled funding, dozens of projects dependent on that capital would collapse. And they, the ones who had laughed at the start, would pay as well. Aurora Blackwell stood motionless, her eyes glowing under the flickering chandelier light. She said nothing at first. The silence tightened Celeste's panic, exposing her unraveling composure. Then Aurora spoke, calm as if reading a report already signed. "You are right about one thing. I will lose a few partners, but I still have hundreds more. Ethelred Holdings does not live on applause. It lives on cash flow, and cash flow always moves toward trust." Whispers broke loose through the room. A few quickly raised their phones, sending urgent messages to their executive teams. "We must review every project with Ethelred tonight." Victor Zhang leaned back, his lips curving into a razor-sharp line. He lifted his glass slightly and murmured for his wife alone to hear. "That is not revenge. That is risk management." And Vaughan just turned herself into the biggest risk, Mina Park typed rapidly on her phone. She does not shout. She makes the entire room reach the conclusion for her. Celeste staggered, her eyes wild. She lunged for the microphone from the MC, who had been cowering silently at the side, and shrieked, her pitch shrill. "This is my party. This is my night. No one steals this spotlight from me." But the chandelier trembled softly in reply, as if rejecting the noise. The crowd no longer applauded. They stood still, faces cold as stone, watching the lone monologue of a fading star. Aurora tilted her head, stepped forward once more. Her indigo silk gown swept across the marble, the red wine stain trailing like a banner of defiance. Her voice came low, steady, cutting effortlessly through the air. "Mrs. Vaughan, I am not stealing your light. You burned it out yourself with arrogance. And now, everyone here sees only ashes." A muted murmur rippled through the hall, not shock but quiet agreement. Those who had once covered their mouths with laughter now bowed their heads. A few even raised their glasses subtly toward Aurora, a silent gesture of apology. Celeste stumbled. The microphone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor, the sound echoing like the snap of handcuffs locking shut. She reached out blindly for support, but her so-called allies had already withdrawn. The party friends from earlier now stared into their phones, feigning busyness. No one stood with her. Aurora surveyed the hall, her gaze neither arrogant nor gleeful. It was the calm steadiness of someone who knew the scales had tipped. She exhaled softly, as if closing the ledger on a balanced account. The ballroom was no longer a party. It had become a courtroom, and the verdict was being etched into history by silence. The air in the hall grew so dense it felt as if it could be cut with a knife. Faces that had once laughed and cheered at Celeste Vaughan's spectacle were now pale and withdrawn. Every phone vibration, every email alert rushing in from Wall Street or distant boardrooms sounded like a death knell for Vaughan Innovations. Aurora Blackwell stood in the eye of the storm, calm, as though the gala itself had been designed to center her. The chandelier light poured down, transforming her indigo silk gown and its red wine stain into a symbol, a living manifesto of dignity that could never be bought. Aurora drew a slow, steady breath, then spoke, her voice even and unhurried, yet carrying farther than any microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I did not come here seeking the spotlight. I came to listen, to observe. But perhaps someone's arrogance has forced me to speak. So I will be clear. The $4.9 billion deal with Vaughan Innovations ends tonight." The room erupted. Shouts rang out, investors leapt to their feet, phones pressed to ears in frantic calls. A woman covered her face and whispered, "We just witnessed a corporate execution right here." Celeste went pale, her lips trembling, nothing escaping but shallow gasps. She snatched at her phone. The screen lit up, messages flashing in rapid succession. CFO. Funds fully withdrawn. Lawyer. All negotiations cancelled. Board. Stock price crashing. Emergency meeting required. Celeste's fingers shook violently. The phone slipped from her grasp, bounced twice, and lay still. Aurora stepped forward. The crowd parted instinctively, like soldiers clearing a path for their general. Her voice was gentle, yet each word struck like a hammer. "You believe power lives in dresses, in flashbulbs, in flattering smiles. But true power lies in the flow of capital. And I am the one holding the valve." The hall fell silent. A few discreetly raised their glasses toward Aurora in quiet recognition. Victor Zhang inclined his head, lifting his glass of red wine, his tone firm. "That is leadership. Not arrogance, but principle. and principle always wins. Mina Park's hands shook as she typed furiously on her screen. Vaughan collapses on camera. Blackwell turns the gala into a courtroom and has just pronounced a death sentence on $4.9 billion. Celeste lifted her head, eyes bloodshot, her voice rasping like a drowning woman grasping for her last breath. You cannot do this. You will regret this. You will drag everyone down with you. Aurora stopped, her gaze as deep and still as a dark lake. She leaned slightly forward, her voice soft but every syllable so sharp the entire hall heard it. No, Celeste, I am not dragging anyone down. I am simply letting go of the rope you tied around yourself. The crowd shivered. Her words cut through every excuse, every pretense. Aurora turned and walked calmly back to her seat, leaving Celeste stranded in the harsh glare of the light. And for the first time that evening, all of Zenith Tower knew with certainty. The throne had changed hands. The ballroom was split like a canvas, slashed in two, half swallowed by heavy silence, half filled with the urgent murmurs spilling from glowing phone screens. Celeste Vaughan's world was melting before her eyes, while Aurora Blackwell's world blazed brighter, not with fireworks, but with the quiet respect rising from every corner of the room. Celeste tried to stand tall, but her trembling shoulders betrayed her. She looked around desperately for allies, but the party companions who had cheered her cruelty minutes ago now avoided her gaze. Some faked phone calls, others stepped back, leaving an invisible gap that isolated her. She stretched out a hand, her voice pleading, "Say something, defend me." No one answered. The empire of applause and compliance collapsed in an instant. Aurora advanced, her stride steady like the ticking of a clock striking the hour of judgment. Her indigo silk gown brushed against the stone floor, the red stain no longer a blemish, but a silent blood flag raised high. She stopped before Celeste, not too close, yet close enough for her shadow to engulf the younger woman. Her voice came even, warm but edged with steel. "Mrs. Vaughan, you poured wine on my gown, called security to throw me out, and believed silence meant defeat. But now look around you. Who still stands with you?" Celeste spun in desperation. The crowd regarded her with unfamiliar eyes. Not admiration, not scorn, but a mix of pity and caution, as if she had become a social contagion no one dared approach. Victor Zhang lifted his glass, his voice clear, slicing through the pretense of the room. This is the price of arrogance. When you believed you had won, you had already lost from the very first moment. A ripple of nods spread across the hall. Faces that had mocked Aurora now turned toward her with respect. A businesswoman in pearls raised her glass of water and murmured just loudly enough for all to hear, "We have just witnessed a true lesson in leadership." Mina Park could hardly believe the scene she was capturing. The woman once called an outsider just made an entire room kneel with silence. A glittering throne collapsed, and a quiet throne was built. Celeste broke down, tears streaking black mascara across her carefully painted face, dripping like ink on ruined parchment. She cried out, a spoiled child losing her toy. "No, I am still the star. I will come back." Aurora shook her head gently, not angry, not mocking, only with the cold certainty of truth. A star? A true star never needs to scream to be seen. You, Celeste, are only fireworks, flaring for a moment, then falling to ashes. The final word spread through the hall, striking each person like a verdict. The room shuddered. No one stood for Celeste anymore. The crown had shattered, and in that opulent gala, beneath crystal lights and empty glasses, one truth was set in stone. Aurora Blackwell was now the one holding absolute power. The crystal light still fell like golden needles, but the entire Zenith Tower had shifted on its axis. The lavish Gala, once a parade of wealth, power, and vanity, had become a silent courtroom where everyone waited for the final verdict. Aurora Blackwell stood tall, her figure rising higher than the tower itself. The red stain on her indigo silk gown was no longer a mark of shame. It blazed like the seal of resolve. She scanned the hall, her eyes pausing on each person, those who had laughed, those who had followed, those who had stayed silent. Each gaze forced them to bow their heads like students called to the board with no answer. Aurora spoke, not rushed, not forceful, but every word etched into the stone floor. Tonight, someone asked me if I belonged in this room. My answer is not only yes. I own it. The hall shook. A gasp rang out from the back, followed by frantic whispers. Some reached for their phones, calling assistance. Others tried to mask their shock by raising their glasses, as though wine could hide the truth they had just witnessed. Victor Zhang lifted his glass, this time openly, his voice carrying clear. That is strength. That is leadership. No one can deny it. A wave spread across the room as glasses of water and champagne were raised toward Aurora. No applause, no noise, only silent acknowledgement. Celeste Vaughan, in the golden gown that had once been the crown of the night, sank into her chair. Mascara streaked her cheeks, her lips trembled, her eyes hollow. She choked out, her voice fractured. "Please give me another chance, we can negotiate." Aurora tilted her head, her eyes sorrowful, yet resolute. She spoke softly, but her soft words rang against the high ceiling. Respect is not a bargaining chip. Not 4 billion, not 4.9. It does not sit on a negotiation table. Never. The crowd stayed silent. Her words cut like a blade, but also carved themselves as an indelible truth into everyone present. Aurora turned, her heels striking slow echoes across the marble. The hall parted. No one dared to block her. No one dared to touch her. The great doors opened, and the nightlight of the city poured in. Her figure merged with that light, tall, straight, commanding. Mina Park lowered her camera and whispered through trembling breath, "This is no longer a story. This is history. And I just captured the moment it was born." Aurora stepped out, leaving behind a shattered crown, a new throne rising, and a lesson no one in that hall would ever forget. Power is not noise. Power is when silence alone makes the world bow its head. That gala night did not end with music, nor with congratulations. It ended with a lesson carved deep. True power does not need to boast. It lies in composure and principle. Aurora Blackwell walked out of Zenith Tower without the flash of cameras, yet behind her she left a room, bowed in silence. And now the question is for you, the one watching. If one day you are belittled, pushed aside because of appearances or prejudice, will you quietly walk away, or will you stand your ground, turning silence into the strength that forces an entire room to change? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can see that dignity is not a commodity to be bargained. It is a foundation that cannot be negotiated.